totalitarian systems are ruled by a sort of singular top-down tyrant. Hitler, Stalin, Lenin. It's like, no, a totalitarian state is ruled by the lie.
Hello and welcome to Off Script. My name is Stephen Edgington. How do you win the culture war? What lessons can we learn from Soviet dissidents? I sat down with Dr. Jordan Peterson to discuss these questions and more. Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Has the right lost the culture war?
We'll see. We'll see. The right lacks vision. They play a rearguard game. They don't have a compelling story to tell young people. And because they're conscientious, conservatives are conscientious, it's easy to hoist them on the petard of guilt. And the psychopathic narcissists of the radical left are unbelievably good at that. And so the conservative types are set back on their heels in a big way, and they don't know how to articulate their own principles. Partly because, like, if you're a conservative, you don't really articulate your principles. You just go about your business, right? You think, well, we'll just do things the way they have been done if they're working, and we'll go attend to our business, and we won't think too much conceptually, and we'll, act practically. And so if you go listen to the Republicans, for example, I went to the Republican Governors Association meeting, and it wasn't inspiring, but the governors would present their policies sort of at the level of practical intervention. They're very practical people, and that's fine, except it doesn't work well against the messianism of the left. So the conservatives are in a position where they just get dragged towards the left one step at a time, and they're also terrible strategists. So, for example, in the United States, the education system, the public education system, eats half of the state budgets. Half. In New York, it's $30,000 a year to educate the typical student. So you imagine that means they're spending near $1 million a year to educate the typical class of 30, to not educate the typical class of 30 people. It's just beyond comprehension. 99% of the donations that are made by the teachers union politically go to the Democrats, and the bloody Department of Education, the faculties of education, have a hammerlock on teacher certification, right? So they have the worst students who go into education for the worst motives, and then they have the worst professors and researchers teaching them. And the faculties of education have done nothing but damage for the last 60 years, and the Republicans are too daft to notice that they've turned the entire culture over to the faculties of education. So it's no bloody wonder the conservatives lose. Like, as strategists, they're 10th rate, and they're not visionaries. Now, they have traditional right on their side, and that's a big deal, but that can be overthrown by assiduous effort on the part of the radicals, and especially the psychopathic radicals. They thrive in chaos, so they're more than willing to turn the whole apple cart upside down in the hopes that they'll be able to scrounge among the ruins and dance in the flames.
It's this issue of how to fight back against this authoritarianism that I'm curious to talk about for this next hour or so, maybe longer, we'll see. But one issue recently has been debanking. So in Canada, a couple of years ago during the trucker protests, you saw truckers whose bank accounts were closed down. They were removing money.
Yeah, we pioneered that here in Canada.
Absolutely. Well, I think the Chinese probably pioneered it,
well,
and then
it could be.
The Canadians took it
At least
up.
among democratic countries.
Well, exactly. And in the UK recently, Nigel Farage has had issues with certain banks refusing to offer him services. Other politicians on the right have had the same thing. And the Conservatives have said in the UK, they're warning the people who are celebrating this could happen to you.
Those are the useful idiots. The useful idiots always think, this will never happen to me. You see this with the Democrats in the US. So I just interviewed Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., who in principle is a Democrat. So they took down the interview. And that just shocked me, because it's a presidential campaign. And the lefties squawked and moaned and bitched for like 3 years about Russian collusion, all of which turned out to be a complete bloody lie because they were interfering with the election. And now YouTube can censor a presidential candidate mid-election, and there isn't a peep from the left. And the reason for that is they think, well, Kennedy's not a real Democrat, without noticing for a second that the definition of real Democrat is going to get increasingly narrow as we move forward, and that's already happened, you know. And I tried for years talking to the Democrats, probably 36 senators and congressmen alike, always asking them the same question. I asked Robert Kennedy this too. When does the left go too far? And to a man or woman, they were either unwilling or unable to answer that question. And so, well, so here we are with this increasing, the increasing normalization of censorship and canceling. And this, by the way, is also a technique that's used by dark tetrad types, right? It's the female equivalent of antisocial behavior, right? So men who are antisocial tend to use physical aggression, but females who are antisocial tend to use reputation destruction and denigration, gossip, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. And that's unbelievable. Now, men can do that too, and will, and do, especially online. But that's enabled by the corporations, you know, the media corporations who are in control of social media communication. So, yeah, people think, well, as long as it's only happening to Kennedy. It's like, have it your way, dimwits.
Now, this culture war, so-called, has been going on for a long time now, fairly long time. You've been at the centre of it for years and years and years, and you've really experienced some terrible abuse and really, I don't know how you went through all of that and came out as you are today. When you look back to the Soviet Union, other authoritarian regimes, obviously there were certain dissidents within those regimes, and I want to talk about them and how they coped with some of the most terrible experiences. Now, obviously you're not in a gulag, you're not in Auschwitz, so you know there's a sort of different level, isn't there? But what do you do when you know that things aren't going to get better? So let's say you're a Soviet dissident and there's just no hope. Do you survive? Do you fight? What do you do in that situation?
Well, everything you do in life is a matter of faith. And why would I say that? You know, the atheist materialist types, the skeptics will say, well, faith just means that you believe in things that aren't there. It's like, that isn't what it means. That's a 13-year-old critique of religious belief, a smart 13-year-old's critique of religious belief. It means that you stake your fate on some set of propositions. Now, the thing is that you do stake your fate on some set of propositions because you have to act in spite of your ultimate ignorance. So in the final analysis, you have to move forward in ignorance. And you move forward in ignorance by assuming the utility of either a stable set of principles and there can be alternatives, or by wavering. Well, here's one principle. Say what you need to save your skin in the moment or to gain advantage. And that means that you have faith in the power of deception. It means that you have faith in the power of the lie. Right? Right. Well, we know who the eternal ruler of the kingdom of the lie is. Or you can have faith in the truth. And that means, to have faith in the truth means that you act in accordance with the assumption that whatever happens, if you tell the truth, is by definition the best thing that could possibly happen. And that means independent of the short-term consequences for you. Now, you're stuck with that anyways, because if you decide to lie, you're making the assumption that escaping scot-free or obtaining an undeserved advantage will pay off over the long run, all things considered. And you have no evidence for that at all, you know, and everyone knows this. You can do something stupid to get out of a jam and get away with it, but the chickens come home to roost, and virtually everyone knows that. So you're going to evince faith in one strategy or another, or you're going to lie sometimes and tell the truth other times, and I wouldn't recommend that at all, because all that does is make you one confused person. So you're playing both ends against the middle. When Christ comes back, in the book of Revelation, he says the worst form of hell is reserved for the people who play both ends against the middle, who sit on the fence. Right, so that's worth knowing. And so if you are wise and you have any sense and a certain degree of courage, then you say what you have to say, and you let the devil take the hindmost. And so that's what you do if you're a dissident. You make your bloody decision. And I've seen this. I just talked to Douglas Murray about this week, you know, because Murray is notable for his courage. And courageous people are actually quite rare, much rarer than I